All right, and we're back. Next up, we have with us Chris Chow, Senior Managing Director at LaSalle Investment Management. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you.
Chris, across Asia-Pacific markets, which sectors or regions have been the most resilient during the pandemic, and why do you think they are able to withstand it?
If you look into the resiliency, right, it's really about which of those asset types can maintain the cash flow, the income of the property type. And the other thing to look into is that some of these resiliency, some of these stronger sector has been forming pre-COVID-19. And what we saw from the pandemic is that the winner is not taking all, but the winner is taking more. The way I want to say this is that for logistic warehouse, for example, it has been an institutional asset class in the last several years. Yep. When we first went into logistic in Japan and China, for example, 1 or 2 decades ago, it wasn't a institutional investment grade asset type for most of the Asian economies. It has gone into this level of institutional grade asset. With the pandemic, that drive further demand in terms of warehouse in the end user perspective, and also institutional investor demand. We see this is not only just resilient, it's continued to be a winner. And the gap we pull from the loser end of the property type, for example, retail, I think the gap is actually widened a bit more, both from the occupier demand standpoint and as well as from the investor standpoint. So we think that this is quite structural. So this is not fully impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, but it is an extension of the winning and losing track. We'll see that continue to display in a couple of years to come.
So it seems then what you were saying is COVID has accelerated things.
That's right. It has amplified the winner sector and the losing sector.
Right. But then the building, I mean, it takes time to build a logistics warehouse. Even though there's more demand, it seems the trend is going there. Are developers able to do that? Because all of a sudden there's more demand, but can they catch up with that demand?
Good question. I think the beauty of logistics in many markets is that has less development risk inherent into those, because we're not building a high-rise building like the office building. Although in some markets like Hong Kong, Japan, that we have multi-story warehouses, but for other markets such as China, we're still doing 1 or 2 story warehouse. We may be doing 3-story warehouse pretty soon, but then those are a bit easier in terms of the construction. But they have also come into other type of challenge. For example, land acquisition could be a challenge for a lot of new entrants of the market. We've been operating in this space, our China team or Japan in this space for over a decade. So they have good access to land acquisition. I think that's the key in terms of developing, providing supply into this space.
Which markets, either in Asia or around the world, do you think will come out better or stronger as a result of COVID-19?
I tend to think that the COVID-19 is very impactful. The impact is very deep, but could be somewhat temporary. So I think the snapshot that we see today maybe is all linked to how different regions and countries respond to the pandemic happened so far. And then maybe going forward and how effective in terms of getting the people have access to the vaccines. So it's really about how much those impact become long-term structural change. Right now we see pretty good containment of the pandemic in China or Korea. Hopefully they'll continue, but it's still yet to be seen who will eventually continue to do well in terms of containing that pandemic in the respective country.
One of the most mature and deepest markets here in Asia Pacific, of course, is Japan. Tell us how Japan real estate has weathered the pandemic, and also could you tell us a little bit about current investors' appetite for that market?
Well, first of all, we have operation in the whole of Asia. We have 6 major destinations that we invest. When Francois and the other speaker also mentioned George just now, talking about we need to have people on the ground, including Japan market, which is one of the biggest office in Asia Pacific operation. That's also important for people like us to have acquisition, asset management people on the ground to execute all these strategy. That's particularly important for COVID-19 when we have investors or who cannot really come to the country, right, to deploy the investment. So having people on the ground to do it for them is very critical. And Asia is so different in terms of different culture and geographic differences. I think the difference in responding to the pandemic will make it even more difficult to underwrite correctly. So we have we have used our team basically to do the whole integration from acquisition all the way to asset management. Japan is one of the biggest market. We are investing in all sector types over there. We have different type of strategy from core to opportunistic. I was saying that because of the low interest rate environment in Japan, and it will continue to be the case, is one of the lowest across Asia Pacific region. So the spread that we use in terms of describing the income that you're getting or the returns you're getting from Japan market compared to the risk-free rate is still very healthy. So I think this is market continue to not only attract foreign investors, it has been for last many years. I think when I talk to my Japanese colleagues, they also see a good flow of Japanese domestic investor. This will not only they will not only help us in terms of deployment, but will also continue to sustain the growth in the real estate investment market in Japan.
Now, regardless of sector, whether it be residential or logistics or retail mall, a lot of these projects were started in a pre-COVID world. Now that COVID has come along, do you think any of these projects might run the risk of being irrelevant, or how can they adapt to make sure that they stay relevant in a post-COVID world?
Very good point. Depends on which asset type as well. When we are developing warehouses, I think the demand is still strong from the occupying standpoint. And from the end user standpoint, they're also serving the end user in a growth environment. So I think those are okay. Of course, if you're delivering hospitality, you will have the different types of income. In terms of timing, it may come in later than you expected. So some of the other players, they may do retail development. They may have to make some changes in terms of how to cope with the shift. The greater shift into e-commerce versus traditional retail. In some locations, right, the traditional retail really becomes an offline, online showroom type of partnership. So I think people can make shift and changes to respond what pandemic has brought to them. Some may just a bit of time. For example, hospitality and lodging, they just need to have those visitors, domestic or overseas, to come back. Some may just have to change in terms of the way they design, they build retail.
My last question for you, Chris, I want to bring it back to the awards. If you compare the submissions from years past to more recent years, are you seeing any kind of big changes in terms of trends, quality of submissions, the kind of projects that get submitted?
I would say that for each of the category, we are seeing some differences in terms of how they approach. Let's say for retail, we have a couple of interesting projects. One from Japan is the old building. They preserved the original facade of the building, but then they modernize the inside, which actually have a very good draw because people are coming in for experience nowadays for retail. If you look at one of the award, the K11, when you walk inside, you don't feel the same type of retail environment. It's much softer. I feel a bit like home. So we feel that these winners, they're able to distinguish themselves by leveraging the existing situation, like the one that in Japan, or basically or the one in K11 that give you a complete new experience on how to give the shoppers a new experience when they come over there.
Okay. Chris Chow, always a pleasure. Thank you for your sharing.
Thank you so much.